Hi there. I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you something important. I'd like to welcome you to Earth. Now, I know you've probably been here for quite a while already, but when most people arrive, they don't actually get the formal introduction. So, you probably already experienced a few of the things that Earth has to offer. The endless blue skies, the fresh mountain air, breaths of exasperation, gasps of pleasure, fields of wheat that seem to go on forever, coconut curry, coffee, chocolate and cherries, Shakespeare, Douglas Adams, and dictionaries. So many things that are false and so many things that are true. Make yourself comfortable because all this is for you. To enjoy, revel, excel, and relax too. I'm really glad that you made it, because not many people do. I just wanted to let you know that you're never alone. Welcome to Earth. Welcome home. Today I'm going to present an interview with Mr. Derrick Broze. Fascinating character. In this interview, I asked him how he began to structure his life around his needs. So he wrote an interesting Facebook status the other day, and I asked him about that. How he managed to structure his life in a way that was fulfilling for him, that didn't necessarily involve money or status. We also talk about freedom cells. So these organizations, these small organizations that are popping up using the concepts of the octalog. So 8 people in a group together working, trying to develop survival skills or communication skills so they can come together and even help each other. And we also talk about his new book with John Vibes, the Manifesto of Free Humans. So he explains a little bit about that. And these books are all about how to bridge the gap between spirituality and liberty, and even bridging the gap between different people's ideas about liberty. We also talk about the Decentralize Your Life tour, where he's traveling with his crew 46 cities over the United States to find out more about people, develop new freedom cells, and all this kind of thing. So if you enjoy the show or the podcast, jump on over to patreon.com/paradiseparadox and you can subscribe for a monthly payment or a monthly contribution. It doesn't have to be big. It can be $1, $5, $10. Anything would help us out. That would be really great. Patreon.com/paradiseparadox. Thanks so much. Let's get into it. So I'm here with Derrick Broze, freedom lover, one of the founders of the Freedom Cells Network, activist, agorist, author of several books, including the upcoming Manifesto of the Free Humans. How are you?
I'm doing great, brother. It's great to speak to you. And been nice to meet you recently.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of stuff we can talk about, but the other day you wrote this Facebook status talking about how in 2009 you decided you don't want to pursue wealth or status or anything. You wanted to fill your life with interesting experiences. And I guess a lot of people have this dream, it kind of passes through their mind, but they let it go. You actually did it. So I wanted to ask you how you did that and how you decided that was so important.
Yeah, sure. I think that's an interesting point to start with. I've realized more and more, especially recently as I'm reflecting on those thoughts, that I made a choice consciously almost 10 years ago to start living my life in a way that served my spiritual health and my mental health and my physical health more than, pursuing material status, wealth, and those kind of things. I think for me, it really started with going to prison. I got locked up in 2005, well over, 12 years ago now, when I was just turning 20, about a week before I turned 21. So I was really lost in a lot of depression and things that I'd been dealing with since I was younger. Got into drugs, went through a bunch of crazy things and ended up in prison. And that really began this sort of rethinking of the direction I was taking my life in and the choices I was making and trying to understand who I was as a person. I really started to get into meditation while I was locked up and started to read about Buddhism and other sort of spiritual teachings and just reflection on in general about who I was and what direction I wanted to go. And it was in the pursuit of that and in the process of that, after getting out and then going back and forth to being locked up and coming in and out of prison, basically I started to think to myself like how I could be free, in what ways I could celebrate being free once this was all over. I got locked up for a while, then I got out and I was on probation, then I went back and forth, and it was basically 3 and 4 years of in and out of institutions and probation and drug tests, and then eventually getting a felony and parole. And so, and again, through all this experience, trying to start enlightening myself and finding better ways to live. And I started to think, what could I do to really be free once this was all over? And I started thinking about different ways I could celebrate my freedom and trying to really envisioning and manifesting this future that would include something different than all this probation, all this legal BS. And eventually in 2011, I took a 3-month bicycle tour, and that sort of cemented my beliefs, because I just spent 3 months traveling by bicycle across the state of Texas and into New Mexico and volunteering and camping on farms and just camping out and just doing a lot of great stuff. So it was in that sort of amidst all that where I just started to realize that none of those other things mattered to me. I don't know if they ever really did matter to me, but at first, I graduated high school, I started going to college and playing that whole role and doing all those traditional things that many of us are told we're expected to do to live a happy life. And I found that wasn't necessarily the path for me. That I'm interested in learning, I'm interested in living a fruitful, thriving life, but maybe not in the methods and the tactics and the ways that the majority of society buys into. And yeah, I really made a conscious decision. I remember that around 2009, when I made that Facebook post, I was reflecting on those choices, and I remember consciously just deciding to myself that, like, you know what, that's gonna be my focus from now on. Like, I want to experience everything that this life has to offer. I want to, experience the ups and the downs, and I think that, like, including going to prison, being locked up, that's sort of another experience. Maybe not the one everybody wants to get, and maybe not even one I was looking for, but I'm able to say that I experienced that. And so I want to experience all that life has to offer. I don't want to be chained to a single job or chained to a career or really anything that's going to hold me back. That doesn't mean that I'm against working or I'm against, relationships, or I'm incapable of focusing on one task at a time or anything like that. It just means that I want to make sure, again, that my life is shaped to benefit and feed my spiritual health. So a lot of my activism and work that I do today is really a part of that. I want to make the world a better place. I want to help myself become stronger and more wiser. And I need the people I surround myself and the institutions that I involve myself with to be a part of that experience. I can't want to be this really awesome person and then go to this job that I hate and work against myself all day, and do things that are conflicting with the things I believe in. At least that's not the path for me. And yeah, it's been a beautiful experience just knowing that this is what matters most. I'm going to trust. I'm going to put all my energy and just into this, than to trying to experience what I can.
Yeah, awesome. Well, one thing about this is when I first interviewed Kenny, he said to me, he told me how he left his home and he just had like $200 in his pocket, and he just set off and started exploring the country. And I said, wow, man, that takes a lot of balls. And he said, well, not really. It was like everything in his life had sort of prepared him to take that step. So with you, when you made those decisions, was it easy or hard? Were you afraid, or it was just sort of natural?
I don't, I'm sure there was, looking back, I'm sure there was some fear and just in the understanding that, well, okay, this is going to be different. This might be difficult. This might not be the easiest path. Like, I really think about the bike tour aspect of it, because that was just such an instrumental part of me really changing my lifestyle. And I remember going into that thinking like, well, this isn't going to be, rainbows and cupcakes all the time. This is going to be a difficult trip. There's going to be times when I'm probably reflecting on it, like, why did I take this? Why am I in this situation? But I decided that, whatever happens, the good and the bad, I'll take it all. And so for me, I think just really it's the experience of being locked up and going to prison. And then again, before that, having spent the first 20 years of my life, I really feel like I was in this fog or this haze, this cloud. I'd spent so much of my young life really depressed and dealing with suicide attempts and just different things that I didn't have the tools to properly communicate and process at the time. And so drugs were the way that I dealt with them. And it took me a long time to start understanding all that stuff. And as I did, it just seemed natural that, I think I need to start feeding my soul now. I've been living for other people, or it felt like that for so long. And I needed to really just find a way to put myself front and center, and not in this sort of like putting my needs over other people in a detrimental way, but just like knowing that, all right, if I'm going to help anybody, I need to help myself. And if I want to really help myself, then I need to enrich my life with experiences and people that are going to provide that. And when you know that that's so valuable and important to you, I think it overcomes any possible fears you may have.
Okay, so it's like when your passion outgrows your fear, that's when you really make a decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So would you recommend that a similar path, like if somebody's in a 9 to 5 and it crosses their mind, hey, maybe I could be doing something better with my life, or something bigger than me? Would you recommend it, or you think it's just for certain people, or what do you think?
I think that everything is going to be different for each person in their circumstance. And this is what I tried to say in that post as well. Is like, I'm not trying to say my particular lifestyle is better than anybody else's, because there are going to be people who are like, hey, I've got 3 kids that I need to feed, and I've got this, and that. Or they may like, hey, well, you're rejecting material wealth and status, but I've got a lot of money and it's been able to buy me, all these fun experiences or whatever. So everybody's going to have different takes on it. I just know for me that this is the path that suits me the best. And I would say, though, if you have, because it seems like there's a lot of people out there who live in ways where they're kind of, I think I've seen it with my work, where people say like, oh, I live vicariously through you by following your adventures and following like the things that you're doing and stuff. So what that indicates to me is that they have a desire to do something similar, to go out there and kind of dive in and try a different type of lifestyle, or at least be more adventurous in some sense, and it would be a shame to see somebody go their whole life with this desire to be out traveling a bit more, to meeting like-minded people, or to seeing new places and to exploring the world, and to go their whole life without actually doing that. I do want to say that just, for anybody who's interested in that sort of the how-to, or just in a different circumstance than I am, because I'm in my early 30s now. I'm not married. I have no kids, so I have quite a bit of freedom to do the things that I want to do, and to live. I try to live. Some people call it simple living or voluntary poverty or whatever you want to say, but I try to live in a way that I don't make a lot of income. I make enough to pay my bills and to do the things I want to do. I'm rich in other ways, and it keeps me out of the tax collector's eyes and hands in certain ways. But also I recognize it has certain limitations, that other people might want to live different ways. But one of the books that really helped me kind of reevaluate this, and it was a book that I listened to on audiobook when I was on my bike tour. It's called The 4-Hour Workweek, and it's by this guy named Tim Ferriss, and he's a very successfully wealthy man, and he just basically tries to lay out his tips on how he became successful without, like at a very young age, and without dedicating 80 hours a week to one specific thing. And I don't know if I agree with everything in there per se, but I think overall this sort of self-help philosophy and some of the real tangible tips that he gives are valuable. And essentially just saying like, why spend the bulk of your years doing things that, for somebody else, in the hopes of living like, the years of your life that are usually the most unhealthy when people are older and weaker and, have more difficult traveling. Why do that your whole life? And so he talks about sort of inserting mini vacations into your life, and like making these target goals, like having different trips kind of sprinkled throughout your life, and finding ways to make, again, like make your needs feed you. And so he gives different tips. And a lot of it comes down, I think, to being sort of an entrepreneurial mindset, which again also works into my work as an anarchist and as an agorist, because that's a big part of the message, is to be an entrepreneur and to go out there and to create and to build the solutions that you want to see. So overall, I think it all just sort of fed into this beautiful thing where I'm like, oh wow, I discovered this philosophy and it talks about being an entrepreneur. Cool, I've already been an entrepreneur. It just seemed to come naturally, And so it's been great to make all these connections and see how it's a part of something bigger.
So let's talk about freedom cells. So this is a very interesting idea, how people can kind of take freedom into their own hands. Do you want to explain it a bit?
Sure. Yeah. So freedom cells is a concept that I've been working on now for over a year, and I picked up the phrasing from a friend of mine, John Bush, who's an activist in Austin, Texas, just a few hours away from me here in Houston. And he developed the concept from another guy, Bob Podolsky, who calls it octalogs. But essentially, the core idea is to bring people together in small groups, small groups in their own community. The ideal number being 8, and there's a lot of research behind 8 as far as why humans work well in this sort of smaller number. The idea being that if there's too many people, we're disorganized. It's hard to communicate and to get tasks done. But if there's too little people, it's too difficult to do certain things. So 8 seems to be a pretty ideal number, and there's also some historical uses of people working in groups of 8. If people do the research, they can find some interesting stuff about that. So the idea is get in your community, find 7 to 9, 8 people to work together to teach each other skills, to teach each other philosophical concepts, to build gardens, to get prepared, have emergency plans for your community. And not necessarily even just like the end of the world kind of thing, but just if you have some kind of weather emergency in your area or something, preparedness group. Also, again, having multiple, say maybe 3 to 6 months of backup supply of food. Everybody in your group has that. Everybody in your freedom cell has encrypted form of communication. Everybody has some form of self-defense, or maybe knows how to use a firearm or whatever you're comfortable with. Or maybe your group takes a self-defense class together and you learn a little bit of martial arts. There's just so many different ways that we're trying to take this concept of bringing people together in small groups and then encouraging, once you've built your core group of 8, every individual turning around and then building another one. So then you've got 8 groups of 8 to 10 people spread across a city. And as we're all building this, the goal is that we're starting to build counterpower to the state, not to go violently overthrow them or try to fight them in some kind of revolution or something, but in true agorist form to join the counter economy, to create counter institutions to the state. And what I mean by that is we're trying to promote decentralization through this freedom cell concept. The individuals within it are completely autonomous. They don't, this isn't like a form of collectivism where people are bound to the others. It's simply saying that, hey, we're all awesome, empowered individuals who want to know more information, who want to develop skills. Let's come together as a group and let's do that. Let's build each other up while also building up our group. And then you also can say that, hey, I have 7 other people here who are on equal footing with me in terms of preparedness. They all know how to teach CPR. They can all communicate in an encrypted way. They all, so you can count on these people in these different ways. It can also work in the sense of like maybe your group wants to go out and do cop watching in your neighborhood, or as I said, build a community garden, or there's a number of different ways that this tactic could be applied, and it's pretty much unlimited the way that we promote it. The website is freedomcells.org. It's essentially been built as like a social network where people can search and see how close people are within their range. Like on the website, you can search 5 miles, 10 miles, 50 miles, and see who pops up in your area. It'll tell you their skills, their interests, etc. You connect with them, communicate with them. And the goal is not just that it'll be another social network like Facebook that people will then join and connect to each other and then meet in the real world and start actually organizing these freedom cells, and that we could create this whole network of individuals and groups who are freedom-minded, who are using cryptocurrency, who are decentralizing a number of different ways, promoting peaceful parenting, nonviolent communication, community gardening, community farming, backyard gardening, all these ways that are decentralizing us and taking us away from the systems of power that exist today and giving us more independence in our neighborhoods and on the individual level. And as I said, with the goal of trying to, I envision in the future being able to travel with this network, and say every person who's traveling on it, they just look on the Freedom Cell network and they find other Freedom Cells, and you can connect with people, and they're like, hey, yeah, let me show you to the local market, or we'll show you where all the other freedom-minded people are. We'll plug you in. Here's businesses that'll take cryptocurrency from you, and here's some cool music festivals, and here's all the counterculture, all these different ways that we can create a hub for freedom-minded people. And my goal, and this is something that my co-author John Vibes and I discussed in our new book, is to push the Freedom Cell network to the point of actually building free communities. So those who are interested, and not just building freedom cells within their neighborhoods and their communities, but actually taking the concept and then moving towards getting land and building free communities that are, again, based on this similar concept. And that's sort of the long-term goal of it. As I said, we've been promoting it now for about a year and a half and going on, and this book release is going to be a big push for that, because we really elaborate upon the concept in the book, and we provide examples of how we're using it here in Houston. I live in the Freethinker House as part of the Houston Freethinkers Activist Alliance, and me and two other guys live here, and we host benefit shows to raise money for various causes. We host documentary screenings. We've got a big community garden here. We're doing skill shares. All kinds of different events just for the people in the community to come out and to participate in. And at the same time, this is like our hub to show how freedom cells can work in action and show what we're building. So all that information is going into the next book and into this upcoming tour that I have going on. And really the goal with that tour is to be able to step back and say, like, we just built 46 new freedom cells in all the cities we visited. We just contributed to 46 new communities. We just met 46 new groups of people and just watch the movement grow. And since I've started talking about this over the last year or so, I've already been contacted by people in New Zealand, Brazil, all over the U.S., the U.K., people who are just saying, hey, we're working on a similar idea. We call it this, or we don't have a name for it yet, or whatever. And it's kind of irrelevant to me. I don't really care whether people call it freedom cells or not. Use the website, connect with people. That's what it's about. Call it whatever you want. As long as we're working towards a similar goal of building local power and trying to educate and empower ourselves so that we can break away from these systems that don't serve us and create something that does serve us. That's really the long-term goal of this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So there are 46 of these groups already.
Maybe more. The 46 reference is to the tour has 46 stops on it. So we're visiting 46 different cities, and a big part of each stop is going to be like explaining the freedom cell concept, and then basically like, hey, maybe there's going to be 15 people there. So like, hey, there's potential for 2 freedom cells right here. Let's see if we can break you guys off, and who lives close to each other, and try to help them get the ideas rolling. Because that's going to be a big part of this tour, is we want to establish this. I'm really at the point in my activism, my journalism, and just my life, that I realize if I want to see the world that I envision, or at least a world with less violence and more freedom, that there's only so much that we can do by just being on social networks. We just came back from Acapulco, and you understand the value of connecting with people face to face in real life. Like, there's so much power to that. So I just realized, like, if we want to build this, if we want this to happen, like, we got to go to the people. We got to travel the country and spread the idea and help people who are already working on it. If it's the one person in their community and they're the one interested in the concept, we're going to give them all the information and all the tools we can. And maybe they'll meet new people who are just coming out to hear us speak, and they didn't even know this other person in their community. And then we connect the two of them, and then that's the beginning of a new freedom. So, so that's going to be the goal with this, spreading this message over the next couple of years. That's really where my work is going to be dedicated, is spreading the message in this book, spreading freedom cells, trying to help build them, and then launching an intentional community built around these principles in 2020. That's really my focus for the next few years.
Okay, so like an agriculturally based community, or it's a bit different?
Yeah, I mean, we want to get land. We want to get land together somewhere. I mean, I've been thinking Texas originally because that's where I'm from, and somewhere outside the city where, we're connecting Houston. It's the 4th largest city in the U.S., and there's lots of activity here, so it allows us, while we're in the city confines, to build and kind of grow this message and work with lots of people. But we would like to be outside of the confines and restrictions and regulations of the city environment, to somewhere where we a little bit more rural, where we can be more free, and the idea being that, again, just take this concept and build. And in the book, we kind of elaborate upon the guiding principles. We have this triangle that we put an image in the book to sort of show what the community is going to be based around. And then the top of this this triangle would be the sovereignty of the individual, which is sometimes known as the non-aggression principle. It's a similar concept, but each individual is their own sovereign, and so is everyone else. So we respect that, and everybody's ability to be free. We don't, interfere on or impede on their ability to be sovereign of their own life. And then another corner of this would be permagora, which is the synthesis of permaculture and agorism. So essentially trying to take the characteristics and the philosophies and the principles of permaculture and applying it to the way that we're going to be building our shelters, the way that we're going to be farming, the way that we're going to be growing our food, all those things. And to me, that's just, again, like taking the idea of non-aggression and applying it to our relationship with the planet itself and trying to be as least invasive and destructive as possible. And then the other corner of this pyramid, or this triangle, will be what I'm just referring to as mindfulness. And this, under this category, we could put things like meditation, we could put group dynamics, group therapy, nonviolent communication, peaceful parenting, unschooling. So all those different aspects will play a role in the way that we as a community interact with each other. And we hope to have regular meditations as a group together, open meditations for people who want to come out. And then with that, those 3 points of the triangle, you add the agrist philosophy and the counter economics working in the black and gray markets to take power away from the state. And that leads to what we are calling the conscious agora. And that is the basis for this community. And that is all in the third part of the upcoming book, Manifesto of the Free Humans, breaks down each of those points for the triangle and then elaborates further upon them. And that's really, we're really saying, like, hey, so we're going to build and spread this message over the next 3 or 4 years. And then in 2020, when people in the United States are preparing to vote for a new master again, we're going to say, okay, you vote for that, you play that game, we're going to build our community. And then in 4 years, let's see which one has gotten further, which one has built more freedom, built more value and happiness and joy in our lives.
That's awesome. So in regards to the freedom cells at the moment, like I know that some of the goals are about mutual aid and even providing health care to people. How developed is that at the moment?
The thing about it, we're still very on in this, and also since it's a decentralized thing at this point, there may be some cities and some areas that are further along than this. I imagine we're the big propagators of this message, right? But without a doubt, there's other people already starting on this. And as I said, people will reach out to me and say, oh, this is an idea we've been doing, or we're doing it in this way. So I really hope, as well as when we're traveling and we're meeting other people, we'll get to learn about this and emphasize, hey, we've already got one city that's providing community health care in this fashion. This is how we can all adopt this with our freedom cells, and use the ideas that we're using in Houston, apply them where they fit to your community, adapt them how they fit to your community, and then the same thing, vice versa. We're going to try to take some ideas that we learn from other people and then bring them in. So at the stage we're at now, I think we're probably very early in a stage one, so to speak, where it's like the message is getting out there. It's still very early in spreading it. We're now connecting people together. We're starting to build first. I think the first step seems to be is you get to know the people in your freedom cell first. You get to know what everybody's individual goals are, and then what are the goals of your group together? Why are you coming together as a freedom cell? What is the vision that you're seeking for? Ours is to eventually get land and to build this community. That might not be everybody's purpose. They may say, hey, you know what? We've got an incredibly violent police force in our neighborhood, and our specific purpose for a freedom cell is to defend our community. So we're going to go out and do cop watching. We're going to do neighborhood watches or whatever, and that might be the main area they specialize in. I put out a video when I came back from reporting on Standing Rock called Freedom Cells Applied to Standing Rock, and basically tried to envision, based on my experience, how that movement and that action could have been organized in a different fashion. And it wasn't really meant to be critical of the movement at all, because I was very supportive. But just to say that out of visiting, Standing Rock and going to Ferguson and visiting a lot of these sort of hostile situations over the years, I've seen a lot of these actions, and I've seen a lot of disorganization on the side of activists. And when you look on the other side of the battlefield, so to speak, you see the police and the military and all of them. They're very well prepared. They have strategies that they've practiced time and time again and trained in. And there's a lack of that with activists. So I was sort of applying this idea. Imagine, so with the Standing Rock, it's just like you've got an open cause. Anybody can come out who wants to help, right? Well, that's a beautiful thing because it allows for anybody and everybody to come, but also it's kind of a difficult thing because it allows for anybody and everybody to come, and some of those people don't care about the original intentions of the core people. Maybe they just want to, like we saw provocateurs coming from other places who are like, let's set things on fire, let's be real aggressive. They were like, screw the natives and screw their prayers, and just totally being disrespectful to the communities who started the movement. So there's got to be a way, I think, for us to have some spontaneous order. There's not, organization itself isn't a bad thing. It's when that organization becomes centralized and it is taken out of the hands of the people who are involved, and it's like one group of people or one person running things. But I was sort of suggesting that perhaps you could have a situation where, say you have a site of resistance against a pipeline or whatever it may be, and you're calling for help from the people. You're like, we want you guys here, but we need only the people who are serious about this. So please go to our website or go to our app and fill out this form or whatever. And maybe you put, your areas of interest, your skills that you have, and then based on that, they can decide who they really want to invite. And you want numbers, you want people who are going to be on the ground, willing to be, standing on the front line, as much as you need medics, and you need people who are going to work the media team, and you need people who are going to be the welcoming committee. And so then what you could do is start to divide this up. And so maybe you have like one main freedom cell that handles medical areas, and one main freedom cell that handles media, security, et cetera, divided up into these different groups. And then of course, within that first freedom cell, you're like, okay, well, we got about 20 people interested in security. Well, let's break this off into 3 different freedom cells, each focused on a different topic related to security. You guys handle this exit, we'll handle this. You know what I mean? So you start dividing the tasks up using the freedom cell concept and applying it to different areas. And I think that's what it's going to take with our communities, is once we get to the numbers where we're actually having dozens and hundreds of people who are involved in this movement in different cities, then yeah, we're going to be able to really truly use, like I encourage people to use Cell 411, the application Cell 411, getcell411.com, which is like, it allows you to send out emergency alerts. So whether you're being abused by a police officer, you got a flat tire, you got a traffic accident, you can send out alerts, and people who are around will see it. You can create your own cell. So the language is already very similar to what we're doing. We have a Houston Freethinkers cell on there, so we can send out alerts if we have meetings going on or if there's an emergency situation. Using Cell 411, the Freedom Cell website, and Nextdoor.com, and all these other sites that are coming out. There's so many decentralized apps that are perfect already for the Freedom Cell concept. They might not necessarily have the sort of anarchist, freedom-minded message within them, though, but it's up to those of us who are of that strain to join these apps and then help show those audience, hey, look, this tool is perfect for building more freedom and for building more value in our communities. So I do think that we're in the early stages, but that's the direction we're going, is to be able to start dividing up into different areas, whether it's healthcare, whether it's defense, and starting to build that. So right now it's up to those who are paying attention, who can be forward thinking, to step up to the plate and to be the first ones. Whether that means you're the one person in your community right now and you go join the Freedom Cell network and you're the only one close by, there's nobody for 50 to 100 miles. Well, just do what you can in the interim, build that message, spread that idea, go out and put up flyers, go try to talk to people and say, hey, I'm just looking for other people to work with a mutual aid group. It's just as simple as that. And then just let it grow and let it develop, and then tell them, hey, by the way, there's a network of other people around the country who are also participating in this. So we're doing something bigger than just ourselves. Help people understand the potential with it. And I think that's really what it's going to take, is just building. And again, that's why the necessity of this tour, because we want to get out there and help build it. We've been contacted by people in Salt Lake City and others who are like, hey, we're just getting it going. I've got a couple of people, or we meet up every other week, and we would love to hear from you guys and your experience. And that's going to be really inspiring, I think, to just get to meet to these other folks who are already working on this, and maybe be even further along than we are.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I've actually heard about a couple of similar or related things in Mexico. So I think there's an archbishop. His name is Raul Vera Lopez. I think he's in the south, in Chiapas or something,
Mm-hmm.
and he's very anti-government. He's probably not an anarchist, but he's very critical of the Mexican government, and he says, well, if they're not going to do something, then we need to do something. So he started getting these communities together and having these public assemblies. So it's kind of like I mean, I guess people would describe it as like a parallel government, or it's like a community organization to to address public problems. And there's also here in Guadalajara in Zapopan, there's a guy he's like the member for Zapopan, and he's set up this kind of system. The people that supported his campaign, they call them nodes, and so there's nodes all over District 10 in Zapopan, and they get together and have community events and discuss what needs to be resolved in their community as well. So it's very interesting. I think this is kind of like, how can I say it? It's like an idea that we don't know exactly where it comes from, but it's like something that's taking off out of nowhere.
No, I agree, and I would love to hear more about that, man. If you want to send me some details on that later, and I totally agree with that, because that is why I feel like once I started to put the idea out, other people reached out and were like, "Hey, well, check out this. Have you heard about this?" And it's like, okay, we're not the only people that all of a sudden seem to think like we need to start getting together, localized in smaller groups. And I do want to say, just to kind of, I didn't mention this earlier, but to explain the concept a little bit deeper, is the wording behind it. So there's two things. The purpose of calling it a cell is, if you can look in warfare and strategy, it's a pretty common tactic to use different cells, some usually covert cells of individuals, groups of small people working covertly to accomplish a task. And the state puts out propaganda about terror cells and things like that. So we wanted to kind of take a play on that and have a cell that promotes freedom. And this concept of cells being hidden and terror cells, so kind of like a dark imagery, where freedom cells, we work in the light. We're out in the open, we're building this message of freedom and essentially what is love and community. So I think that's important. And then also we take the cell in the sense that, like every cell in our body is an individual, organism, but it's also a part of this larger collective that is completing a task much bigger than itself. So that's how I see it, is that each individual cell that we're building, locally, can connect to this larger organism. Like you said, it can be almost like a parallel government, but of course without the qualities and the characteristics that we know don't serve people and are oppressive. So I think that's important to remember too, is that we're trying to build cells that can spread freedom, can spread community, can spread love, and can be a parallel to the state that we've seen so far, and hopefully lead us towards somewhere that's more free.
Yes. Well, there's this fascinating video of a lecture by Bruce Lipton. Are you familiar with Bruce Lipton?
Yeah, he does epigenetics, right?
He's a biologist. Epigenetics and some other things. Yeah, and there's this video where he talks about the cells of the body, or no, he talks about certain amoeba and how when the amoeba get together, it's like this sudden change, and it seems like this evolution came out of nowhere, but it's actually like all of these things getting together over time. And then suddenly you can see that it's a new thing. So the idea is, one idea is maybe this is like this next step in human evolution, how we can have these individual cells. And I think this came up the other day reading your book, The Conscious Resistance, about how we can respect the individual but have a collective as well. And that can be the next step.
Absolutely. I think that, again, that's important. I try to emphasize that, and John and I tried to break that down in the first book, because there seemed to be, I'm an individualist. I'm a proud individualist. I believe that the individual is one of the smallest minorities that's always under threat, and that if we don't have individuals, then we lose sight of everything, But I like to say that I'm after collective liberation through individual means, So I do want to free myself, but I also realize that I'm only so free if everybody else I care about and love is still in chains, that pretty much limits me in a lot of ways. So it's to my benefit that other people are unplugged and that other people are free. So I think that's important to remember, that we can have structure, we can have organization, we can come together with other people without losing sight of our individual power.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. And another thing I read in your book, I mentioned to you the point about somia, So many people, when you talk about anarchy or having a stateless society, they say, well, that doesn't exist, or, that's impossible, it's utopian, whatever. But there is this example of Zamir of maybe 100 million people living peacefully outside of government control and willfully outside of government control, like they wanted to escape it. And it's this brilliant example of freedom there. And you point out how there have probably been these civilizations or these pockets of freedom outside of state control for thousands of years, but we just never hear about it because they're like invisible.
And that's another thing, is it's also a product of the fact that the tyrants, the statists, they write the history. You know what I mean? So they're not really going to be promoting this concept that, hey, by the way, there was this group of people that lived outside of our rules and regulations, and they seem to be pretty happy. But don't pay any attention to them, though. But yeah, Zomia is a great example of that. To anyone who's interested, we mentioned it in our book, but really the book that breaks it down is called The Art of Not Being Governed by James C. Scott. And that's a really great book that I recommend to everyone. I need to pick myself up a new copy. And he goes through and examines how it's not only just the history of these people, which is Zomia was never an actual, there's no state that you're going to find of that, but it's to the name that's given to this area of territory that's contiguous, where all of the people in Southeast Upland Asia were essentially in the mountainous regions where the state couldn't get to or wouldn't get to, didn't want to bother. And people developed spiritual customs, agricultural customs, cultural customs that were definitively anti-state. And because they didn't want to go down into the valleys and the cities and be taxed, they didn't want to go there and have their land taken from them and deal with all this. So they chose to stay further up in the mountains and up in the hills, and to develop their own customs that suited the lifestyle they want. And this is really just what we're talking about. That these examples, these pockets, there's probably untold that have come and gone, and maybe they only last for a certain period of time. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are a failure in the sense that they were incapable of living, or humans can't survive without the state. More than that, I would say it is an example of the aggressiveness of the state and the state's desire to swallow up anything that dares challenge it or live outside of its confines. So. And this is, another point I want to make, because I've been talking about freedom cells a lot in recent interviews, and I imagine we'll continue to do so. And one question that is pretty common that comes up is, well, this all sounds great and everything, but what are they going to do whenever the government comes with guns and tries to, take them over or whatever? Their happy little freedom cell is going to be useless. For one, I think it would be kind of silly to assume that our communities and the message that we're preaching, doesn't include self-defense. Self-defense of any kind is going to be valuable for anybody, whether that means you're trying to defend yourself against common criminals on the street or criminals who work for the state. Either way, like, you want to be able to defend yourself against criminal behavior regardless of where it's coming from. And yes, the state has a history of approaching and condemning and eventually trying to control and dominate communities that seek more freedom than they want to put forth. But I still think it's a worthy goal. Should we stand by and do nothing just because there's a fear of, like, well, look, every community in the past that has grown has been swallowed up by the state eventually, or they've been incorporated, or the state has become aggressive? That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything. I feel like we are blessed now to live in a time where we have all of the knowledge of the past, of all the people who've ever tried to live free in different ways and build free communities. We've got that on the internet available to us. We've got books, we've got more information than has ever been accessible, and we've got technology that people have never been able to use that can help us find ways to be more decentralized and more free. So if anything, we have the best opportunity ever. Yes, the state may have grown massively over the past couple hundred years, and people who were alive, anarchists who were alive in the past, if they were alive today, they probably would just be baffled by the amount of power and that the state has, and the amount of interest that they're engaged in with our lives. But still, we have so much available to us: knowledge, resources, technology. It's an incredible time to be alive, and I feel like we shouldn't get stuck in the fear that it'll get swallowed up like Zomia. Or people say, well, what about Waco, Texas? They came in there to that religious community and they killed kids and they did these kind of things. I mean, these are all realistic possibilities, and this is definitely the way the state acts. But we should not allow our fears of these possible consequences to keep us from acting, because even if there's a single slight opportunity for success, that should be enough motivation for us to push forward, because the possibility of succeeding means something very great. That means that we're going to be able to show people real world examples of how to live freely with dealing with the state as minimally as possible. And if that becomes a concept that grows and the communities flourish, then we're going to have whole generations raised in something completely different than the majority of us were given.
Well, I think it's cool too, because when you do have a small group of 8 people, like if you have a huge organization of thousands, like a huge assembly or something, then it's going to be very obvious, and there's not really much way to hide that. But if you just have 8 people, or like lots of groups of 8 people, each group of 8 people can kind of just disappear to some extent. They can just hide from the state.
I think that's a pretty cool idea too. I hadn't really thought about that, because I think about it in the reverse. That it's like, hey, if there's trouble, we can come together as one
Yep.
unit. But then it's the same thing, like you said, you can easily disperse as well. It's not like there's this giant thing. It's like, well, let's go back to our individual communities, our individual actions, disperse,
Yep.
and then come back together when there's a need.
Yeah. Cool. Do you want to tell me a bit more about your new book?
The new book is called Manifesto of the Free Humans. It is going to be released probably by the time this is out. It's going to be coming out April 7th, so next Friday. It's the third book in the Conscious Resistance series, which is written by myself and John Vibes, who's another author and activist on the East Coast in the U.S. And we have been writing this book series now for going on 3 years. We met in 2012, and we did podcasts for a couple of years, sort of realizing that we both had an interest in spirituality and explorations of consciousness and psychedelics and shamanism, as much as voluntarism and anarchism and ideas like non-aggression. And over a couple of years of podcasting and just talking about it, we realized that, hey, we might have some material here that should be put into something, that should be turned into a book. And it was around that time that I was also discovering the concept of the conscious resistance, which it came to me in the summer of 2012 originally. Yeah, 2012. And I was just having difficulty at that time trying to live a life where I was dividing these values in my life. For example, I'm involved in activist circles and political circles, so that there was that aspect of myself. But I was also involved in meditation circles and conscious spiritual communities. But I had tended to always keep these worlds separate. Inside, to me, they were one and the same. But I would like, okay, well, let me not talk about my activism over here, and let me not bring in my spiritual beliefs over here. But over time, it just became more and more difficult. I just realized like these were one thing. Like they needed to be the same message. They fed into each other. And summer 2012, I had like 3 or 4 days where I just couldn't sleep, and I was going through one of those periods of deep down the rabbit hole and lots of research. And then the phrase just came to me, and I was like, wow, I need to, like, that's what it is. It's like I need to bring it all together and really push this message of spiritual evolution and spiritual liberation as much as physical liberation. And in the conversations that John continued, and we came up with the first book, Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality, which is sort of the primer, the basis. We cover a lot of material, a lot of ground, and a lot of references, because we want to give people a lot to chew on and to think about. And some of it is probably for people who've been involved in research for a number of years. Some of it's probably things they've heard, hopefully presented in some new context. But others is probably new to a lot of people. And we didn't anticipate that we were going to be writing a trilogy. We just put out that first book on its own. And then within about 6 months or so, John and I met up again, because we've only seen each other in person like 6 or 7 times, over the years. And so we connected again, and then realized that we had more material, that we both felt like, what, I think there might be another step to this. Like maybe we have something else to say. And then before we knew it, we started developing this idea of like a trilogy that would come out. And so we put out the second book last year, which is called Finding Freedom in an Age of Confusion. And what we like to tell people is the first book is like the body, because it explains the full context. Like here's some anarchist history, here's some of our personal spiritual history, here's some stuff about psychedelics, and trying to weave it all together and show people something powerful. Then the next book, Finding Freedom, is like the emotional center. It's the heart of the message, because it's just a set of essays that are about empowerment. It really is meant to come to those individuals who are experiencing maybe anger, fear, doubt, or confusion. The sort of things that happen to a lot of us whenever we're going through difficult things and just starting to wake up to the world. It can be a difficult place. Sometimes people get depressed, they get apathetic, or they just stay in a very angry state. So these essays are written for those. Like, it also ends with the second half of that book has meditations and positive affirmations and different tools that we hope will kind of uplift the individual. And this third book, Manifesto of the Free Humans, is, we're calling it the mind, because this is more of the philosophical aspect, and it's also the do-it-yourself handbook guide to vacating the state. John and I wanted to write as much as possible, like a literal handbook for tips to get out. So it's a good mix of history, philosophy, and the practical steps. Like, here's things you can do. Download this app and try this. Try these steps. Do that. So it goes deep into freedom cells, and it goes into the intentional community. It looks at some of the history of the individualist anarchist movement in the United States and some of the lessons we've learned from there. And then also asks some different questions about how people can coexist in this potentially stateless society. How would we deal with environmental issues or immigration or borders and different things like that? So we talk about a lot of those issues and give our take on them. And I think we offer some fresh viewpoints on these subjects that haven't really been put forth. We really did try hard to put these are, in the last two books, I feel like it wasn't that John and I were wishy-washy or anything like that, but there were certain issues, and you may be able to sense this in the first book, like property and some other things, where we're kind of like, our views are still developing. We're not going to like plant a flag firmly in one camp yet. You know what I mean? Like, this is where we're at, but we're still learning and we're still evolving our own ideas. So this book, we really kind of hammer down, like, this is what we believe. These are the ideas we support. But at the same time, re-emphasizing that we're willing to work with nearly everybody. Unless you're out there just a tyrant declaring that you want to, enslave other people or, something aggressive and violent like that, more than likely we're willing to find common ground and focus on those goals and build together. So it's meant to be as much of a handbook as possible. I'm excited. I'm extremely excited about it. We actually just posted it on the website. If you go to theconsciousresistance.com/books, there's a link to it there, and it has a list of the chapters, and it has a list of a little summary of the book. And you can actually already order it off CreateSpace or Amazon. And I think people are already starting to get their books in the mail. I don't even have my own copy yet, but I should have one by next week, and then it'll be officially released April 7th at the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia. And then, like I said, we're going to get ready for the tour and just take the message with us on the road this summer.
Great. Okay. Sounds wonderful. I guess that's all my questions. Did you have anything else you want to say or promote or shout out?
No, man, I appreciate the work that you're doing. It was awesome to hear you perform. I want to say that at Anarcho, dude. You're very talented, and I want you to come down and perform in Houston whenever you want to. We'd love to have you out here. And I'm very thankful and blessed that every day I get to talk to other beautiful people who are working on powerful things, and that this is the life that we've created for ourselves. We get to spend it trying to make the world a better place, and what's more beautiful than that? So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and your audience. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Derrick. It's a pleasure to know you.
Absolutely, brother.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Derrick Broze. Next week, I've got an interview coming up with my friend Carrie Giudici, talking about a new system of education, a decentralized network of mentorship. So that should be really interesting. That's in the works. Remember, if you like the show, it doesn't hurt to contribute a little bit. You can jump on over to patreon.com/Paradise Paradox and pledge a monthly contribution, like $1, $5, $10, whatever you like. And that will help us continue this show, support it, and keep the new, fresh content coming and the fat rhymes. So thanks so much for tuning in. Great to see you, and I'll catch you next week. Bye.